The Democratic National Convention has ended. Kamala Harris has accepted her party's nomination to be their candidate for president. And now there's a sprint to November and the presidential election to find out who's going to be the next occupant of the White House. One of those times when we know for sure it's going to be a different person than the person occupying it right now. And there has been so much going on, especially just within the last few months in this campaign, much more so than I think than in a normal campaign. You had one had an attempted assassination attempt, and then all of a sudden you had the second one drop out and someone else pop in and take his place. So this is about as unusual as you get. So we're actually going to be doing at least one show every week from now on, all the way through the election, of kind of a state of the race kind of situation, kind of bring you up to date of what's going on. We're going to continue to bring you expert folks who know a lot about these campaigns and can give you some deep dive behind the scenes look. And that's what we're going to do today. And the first one we have hadn't been with us for a while, but Jim Webb, a experienced political and campaign policy consultant who has, in fact, was working on the RFK campaign earlier in this season. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Dan, absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me back. It's been a minute. It's great to see your face.
It is. It's good to see you back. I guess I don't want to take you away from the fishing too much because I know it's pretty good down there in Florida. So we won't get in the way of that, but appreciate you taking the time for us.
Hey, not a problem. When I got the invite, I was in the middle of a bass tournament. So
well, I'm making I interrupted that. So appreciate the coming on there. We're going to be appreciating what you have to say here. So our topic of today, we actually had a show I guess toward the end of last week, kind of what was going on with the Kamala Harris campaign, and especially coming off of her acceptance of the nomination, some of the things that she had said. So we wanted to look kind of at the Trump side of that today. And, a lot of the headlines running around is Trump trying to reset his campaign. Is it too little too late? And this is I think here in this is Politico, I believe, where they have said, he's trying to reset his campaign after a brutal month. And, gosh, it's hard to call it anything besides that, because, initially after the attempted assassination there in Butler, Pennsylvania, and that what everyone thought at the time was going to be this big iconic picture of him with his fist raised up and all this. And then that was right before the Republican convention. And it looked like, man, he was going to completely capitalize on that. And he initially was talking about, unity and bring people together, et cetera. And it's like there's a new Trump, and coming a brush with death is really going to change things. And that all kind of evaporated. And especially when it became clear after the debate that Biden was going to not make it, and then he dropped out. And so now then, all the stuff that they had done up to that point was about Biden, and now they're trying to shift to Kamala Harris, who is not the vice president with the worst popularity ratings of any vice president in the history of the polling in the first couple of years of her campaign, of her tenure, rather. And so now all of a sudden she's like a rock star and having all these things. So the Trump campaign is way thrown off base. So I just kind of want, first of all, your general thoughts about where Trump was after the convention and what he's at now that the Democratic convention is open. How has that worked out?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, I think he's almost exactly where you said he is. Last month has been absolutely brutal. There's been a big time fumble, I think, on his campaign staff. But I also don't think that really it's not over. It's not over by a long shot. If there's one thing consistent about Kamala Harris is that she is wildly unpopular wherever she goes. And the more she talks and the more she opens her mouth, the less people like her. And I believe very strongly, and I think there's a lot of evidence out there, if you take a look at how her campaign is hiding her right now, that they understand that. But there's a lot to unpack here. But so let's go back to the assassination attempt on Trump. Right, you were right. There was an absolutely iconic moment where he stood up and shook his fist. It absolutely appeared that the entire country, for the most part, particularly the independents in the middle, were galvanized behind him. And I even turned to my wife that night and said, "Hey, this is over. This is absolutely over." It felt like a giant load was off my back. It's kind of looking forward to seeing this administration out. And then the convention itself was fantastic. I watched all of it. There's a very positive message all the way right up until Trump's acceptance speech. And I believe he made his first mistake right there, which is he managed to do what he normally does, which is unfortunate. He got up in front of a crowd and he went off script. I took a stopwatch to it, to be honest, and counted about 30 extra minutes of him talking about himself off his script. And if you guys want to go back and look at the tape, the viewers at home, pretty much anytime. Sorry about this. This is not supposed to happen. Oh, man, sorry, signal call. Every time he looked down the center line, away from the teleprompters off on the sides, he was pretty much off script. And there was a great opportunity there for him to continue to be positive, to continue to illustrate his vision for the country, not mention Biden by name, because there was a strong chance after that debate that, Biden was going to be gone. And it would have really been in their interest to pin all of the failings on the last couple of years on the administration, kind of a broad umbrella of blame, if you will, that would have encompassed Biden. It would have encompassed Kamala. And it made a transition out, a lot easier. Once they brought JD Vance on board, that's a completely separate, set of circumstances. I don't think he was the best pick. I don't think he's an absolutely horrific pick. He's a fellow Marine. I absolutely think that I'm elated that somebody who fought in the GWAT is, in position to be the vice president of the United States. But there was this immediate pivot into an extreme negative. And it wasn't done by surrogates on the outside, which is what you typically want. You don't want the candidates themselves going extremely negative, because it turns voters off in a big way. You want your surrogates out there as your attack dogs, coming in and pinning things, on your opponent. And I tremendously felt that they wasted a lot of valuable ammunition and time, because, you only had, 88, 87, 86, now we're inside of that days to get your message out there. And they spent a whole bunch of time trying to pin walls as.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question on that specifically, because you worked for the RFK campaign early on. And so you were part of the team that was, I think you were primarily one of the foreign policy advisors, if I'm not mistaken, but you were also part of the overall team that was supposed to set directions for that. So I wonder if you can explain a little bit of how that actually works on the inside of a campaign, whether it was RFK or Trump.
So you have what you initially want to do is you want to define your opponent, right? You want to define them as certain pieces, and you have or a certain the way they are. You want to stick them in a defensive position, primarily on policy. You want to stick them in place. It's a lot like infantry tactics, right? Stick them in place and move around them. And you move around them with a positive message. And this is done through meetings. You hash it out. You hash out with policy papers, with meetings with the principal, aka the candidate, and you figure out a pathway, and it's charted out over time, right? This isn't off the cuff. It's not like, on Monday they nominated Walz, and on Tuesday they decided, hey, by the way, it's a good idea to kind of come after this guy on being a veteran or not. This is stuff that's in the hopper for a long time, and you have an arc. That being said, I think going after Walz in his veteran status was a giant mistake. It's a waste of time. You're preaching to people like you and me who already know what he did or didn't do. Right. And anything that comes out about that just kind of redefines that he's a greasy politician. What you could be doing is articulating what your vision for the country is, and illustrating how this guy does not meet it policy-wise, and let the rest catch up. That's how you move voters. However, in the affirmative, and kind of a long-term look, right? There is time left, and I have the utmost confidence that the best is yet to come in terms of what the Trump campaign is going to deliver on. And you want to finish strong in one of these campaigns. You don't want to shoot your best shot right out of the gate. And I'm hoping, and I am going to vote for Trump. I'll be frank about that. I think he presents the best vision for our country. I am not on his payroll. I don't intend to be, but as a citizen, and a citizen with kids, I am petrified of another 4 years of this administration in place.
Now, let me ask you something. You said something a second ago. You said that you thought Trump had fumbled the good stop or the good position that he had, especially after the convention. Was one of those things this selection of J.D. Vance? Because I've heard some conflicting reports. At first, I'll just be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about him, other than that he was really good on the Russia-Ukraine war. I was very much a big fan of the things he said. He seemed to have a good logic behind it. And so I thought, okay, maybe he'll make a good one. Well, as soon as he was named as the vice presidential candidate, all of a sudden was all kinds of stuff that would come up after him that I was thinking, man, didn't the campaign totally vet this guy to find out what was back there so that these things wouldn't be a surprise whenever they came up? But it seemed like there was a lot of stuff that should have been, if nothing else, a little bit of a yellow flag to say maybe you might want to go a different direction. Where do you come down on his selection of Vance as a VP candidate?
I would have rather seen Governor Youngkin from Virginia. So the addition of anybody from Ohio, if you're looking at each state as a move on the chessboard that you need to capture, you need to capture these different pieces. Ohio is red. Ohio is deep red. It might have some spillover into Pennsylvania, but Virginia is purple. And if you would have selected Youngkin, you would have had they would have had.
I'm sorry, for those who may not know, can you define what it means between purple and red and how that translates into voters?
Right. So it's red state, Florida, Ohio, they vote deep Republican. It's very reliably Republican. Purple is a toss-up, blue, Democrat. And if you have purple states, particularly a state like Virginia, which is deeply conservative in a lot of its outlook, and really the only thing that keeps it voting Democrat is Northern Virginia, inside the Beltway.
Where I live, by the way.
Exactly.
I see it every day.
Yeah, where I grew up. And it's they've moved Manhattan into Arlington, and that's maybe not exactly the truth, but it's very close to the truth. But and you want to counter that, right? And that's I believe 13 electoral votes. I could be wrong, but it's a sizable chunk. And if you go back to 2006, 2008, it was a big deal that they elected Democratic senators and then voted for Obama. And it's been in that camp ever since. And there was an opportunity with Governor Youngkin, who is very strong, very, very strong on the social issues such as transgenderism, some of this really weird woke stuff that's out there, and would have been not only a natural counterweight, but he is a business professional who is not necessarily a politician except for being elected last time around. And, it would have set the Republican Party up, I think, long term. And, that's one of the things that I believe Trump was looking at, or should have been looking at is, his VP is almost unequivocally going to be the presidential candidate the next time around. He is the future of the party. And quite frankly, I don't see J.D. Vance as that. There's a number of people, who were involved in the primary process, who are floating around the Republican Party, who could have met that threshold. However, I think it comes down to personality conflicts. Glenn Youngkin stands on his own. He's his own man. He's not going to carry water for somebody. And he may have just not been interested. Or it could have presented a personality conflict inside the room that President Trump didn't want to deal with.
I see. Okay, so that was one. Was there anything else that you had in mind? You thought that Trump fumbled since the convention?
Going so hard negative. That's the big thing. He managed to turn the assassination attempt into more about himself than about an iconic moment or a pivotal moment for the country. If you listen to his campaign or his acceptance speech at the convention, it was more about him than it was about, hey, where are we at as a country? We need to change this. I want to bring everybody together. And then his really odd attempt to paint Kamala Harris as not black. It's quite frankly.
Yeah, I thought that was not a good move.
No, who are you? You're just inviting people to take shots at you, and you're not moving the needle. And then it was followed by going after Walz so hard. Not that I like Walz, But the guy,
you're just talking from a campaign perspective.
Exactly.
That's just not a winning move. What would have been a winning move? If he hadn't have done those two things? If you had been on his campaign staff? What would you have advised him to do?
Paint Kamala's communist, straight up. She's very far left. She's never done anything. So, it's really hard to determine, if you look at some of her speeches, she paraphrases Karl Marx from those according to their ability to those according to their needs. And she spices it up a little bit, but that's easy fodder. Particularly when you contrast that with his vision of low corporate taxes, growing the economy, individual freedom. And to stay on that positive trait while ensuring that, she is painted as a do-nothing who is a fan of Karl Marx, it would have been time much, much better spent.
Do you think that? So why would that be a success? Because it seems to me like that's almost like that's so Cold War-ish, talking about somebody who's Karl Marx. I don't know if a lot of young voters even know who Karl Marx is. Right. How would that be successful?
Well, we're in a pretty dire situation, I think, economically in the country. And the two major issues that are going to be, decisive in this election are the economy itself, followed by immigration, both of which Kamala Harris has absolutely no clue how to handle. And quite frankly, she comes off as somebody who is very pro open border and very pro high tax. And taxes any higher than what we're paying right now, you're looking upwards of 40%. And they've even said they want to raise taxes. And I don't know how many voters even know that right now on the other side. Instead, they're coming after her continuously on, things she cannot change, like her skin color. And I'm not throwing the race card out there, but it's a complete non-starter because people just don't want to get in the middle of that. It's just icky, for lack of a better word. So that's pretty much it. If you could just sit down on her, metaphorically on the border constantly and say, hey, this is where she's at. This is what she was in charge of. This is what we're going to do because this is what I did in the last 4 years and didn't have a chance to accomplish it. Then it's affirmative. It's moving forward. It's moving the ball forward in a way that the vast majority of voters, probably 2/3, want to see.
Okay, so now there's a relatively new track I've seen Trump on, and what's your view on this one? Because it seems to me that this might have a little bit more chance of success in terms of not going after, race issues or something else like that, but more on substantive policy issues. Watch this.
Kamala has declared that tackling inflation will be a day one priority. Just think of it for her, but day one for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. Why hasn't she done it?
I've actually been hearing a lot of people, that my wife being one of them, with a number of the claims and promises that the Kamala campaign is going on. She's like going, yeah, why do you need to wait till January of next year? You're in the House now. Why are you not working on these things now? Is there room for that to take any traction?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, he's fighting uphill at this point, on those issues, because he had the attention of the entire country after he got shot. Straight up. It was right there. He had the floor. Everybody was listening to him, and people agreed that what happened was a result of all the negativity and, potential corruption in this country. Is one way you want to put it. And he veered away. However, this is exactly where he needs to be, and he needs to stay there, with his opponent, and then further that by saying, I was in effect derailed after my first 4 years, and these people have rolled back what I was trying to do, and look where we are. It should move the needle. But once again, you're out, he has to regain the spotlight for something, something really different, and there's no real way to count, or you can't count on, having another iconic moment, which captures
right.
the nation's attention,
right,
in the way that did. And I don't think he'd want to go through that again. I don't want to see it again, for one.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's ironic that I happen to live right next, and I mean 2 streets over from the Trump golf course here in Sterling, Virginia. And I've seen Trump a number of times. There's some friend of his that lives a few blocks away from here, right next to his golf course that he stays with when he's in town. And in the past, because I walk my dog up around that area a lot, and in the past, there's been like 3 or 4 Secret Service cars or whatever, and they would come in and they would go out with about a 4-vehicle convoy. Well, today there was after the assassination attempt. Now then, there was I think it was about a dozen motorcycles. Then 30 vehicles of various types, doing all the other stuff, which is it looked like a parade going down our street. So there's a big difference between what it used to be and what it is now. So I just thought that was really interesting. Certainly for those people who live around here, it was very inconvenient because they shut down all the traffic around here. But I want to go to another issue about the Trump campaign and how it is or isn't going to help, and it resolves around your old boss, RFK Jr. Now, he of course made a lot of splash over the weekend by saying he was suspending his campaign and he was going to throw his weight behind Trump, and of course that was immediately by the other side pulled out all the clips about him saying all these terrible things about Trump and Trump saying bad things about him. And when he was asked on Fox News why he did it, here's what he said.
It became clear to me that I did not have a path to victory. 16 months of censorship, of not being able to get on any network really except for Fox. When Ross Perot ran, in the 10 months that he ran, he had 34 appearances on the networks. I had 2 appearances in 16 months. So I was blocked out from the networks. I was blocked out from the debate. I had no path to victory. President Trump had been reaching out to me.
Okay, so first of all, let's look at some of the substance that he said. Now, I've known in some conversations you and I have had in the past that you thought that he did have a path early on, but then he went down some bad tracks and focused on some wrong, I guess, campaign strategies, if you will, which is one of the reasons, if I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to, that you left the campaign. Did he have a path, and did he just now come up to not having a path to victory, or should this have happened long ago?
Well, I'm happy that he endorsed Trump. Let's put it that way. I think he did the right thing and did a great job redeeming. It's like any kind of story. You want to redeem your character, and he's got some redemption by stepping out at the right time and doing the right thing. That being said, he definitely had multiple pathways to the White House, which all came apart in probably October, November. The first mistake that he made, in my opinion, was leaving the Democrat Party and trying to run as an independent. So
let me ask you a question. What do you think would have happened? I've been meaning to ask you this anyway, separately. If he had not left the Democratic Party and had stayed in it, and then we had that disastrous response or result of Biden in the June debate, instead of looking to go to Kamala Harris, wouldn't they have looked right next to him?
They would have had to. And quite frankly, Dan, could you imagine RFK debating Biden during the Iowa caucus? Like, just put them both on the same on the same stage. It wouldn't have been fair. He would have been eliminated. He would have eliminated Biden at that point the same way Trump did it, a couple months ago. And it would have been a massive windfall. Policy wise, there was a horrific mistake he made by going so hard on backing the IDF's operations in Gaza, which was the reason I left. And for the viewers out there, I'm not some bleeding heart liberal. I got really upset when he tried to say the way that me and my fellow Marines operated in Iraq was the same way. He went on TV and did this, operate the same way as the IDF is in Gaza. And it's just straight up not true. But in terms of policy, that made his position on Ukraine completely contradictory with his position on Israel. And it undermined him. The people in the middle who were looking for somebody who could, speak truth to power and think through things logically, particularly when it pertained to foreign policy, write him off as just another neoliberal who's, got a different letter, next to his candidate ID is I instead of a D or an R. And that was pretty much the end of that. because what that did was it eliminated, say, the libertarian vote from gravitating towards him and pushed them back to Trump. And then he was effectively exactly the same as Biden and Harris on the issue. So the progressive vote went back to the left. And, speaking, about going forward for Trump, I think it would really benefit him to embrace more of RFK's rhetoric on Ukraine as a contrast to Kamala Harris. Watching your segment prior to this, it's a giant mess in Ukraine, and it's incredibly volatile, and it's a big worry for, I can speak for not all veterans, but in the veteran community. We're really worried about the repercussions of that war and how it's seemingly spiraling out of control with nobody in charge.
Well, certainly, as another veteran, I'm right there with you on that, as you might guess. Want to look at a different aspect of it. So one of the questions that a lot of people ask when RFK did this is, what's in it for him? Because there's no free lunch in Washington, D.C., as you know better than most. So the question that was asked to him was, is there a quid pro quo? If you endorse him here, is there expectation if he wins that you're going to get this? Here's how he replied.
Have you all negotiated over or talked about a cabinet position, another position within a Trump government in exchange for your endorsement?
No, there's been no commitments. But I met with President Trump, with his family, with his closer advisors, and we just made a general commitment that we were going to work together.
So now I'm sure that even if there were conversations like, hey, would you like to be Secretary of State, Defense, National Security, whatever, fill in the blank, it's not like he's going to go, oh, yeah, he said for sure, I'm going to get this job here. So is there any other way he could have answered? And do you think that if Trump wins, that there will be some place for RFK in his government?
I think there will be a place. I think they've had that talk. And if you look at the words he selected, the qualifying language, there were no commitments. And President Trump he's a savvy individual who's a fantastic negotiator, and he's not going to hand over what RFK wants until he gets what he wants. And I don't think it was straight up the endorsement. I think he wants him to be out there with him and try and draw in some of these independent voters. And he gets that. And if that gets accomplished, RFK should have a position, if he wants it, inside of the administration. What that's going to be, it's a good question. He could be a pretty interesting guy to have, taken over any number of agencies, to be honest.
And what would you, if you were advising Trump based on the fact that you know him, what would you have suggested that he could be good at?
Health and Human Services, something, maybe, maybe if you really wanted to throw a wrench in everything, and President Trump had a great sense of humor, the CIA.
Okay, fair enough. I hear you. That would be a good sense of humor. I'm not sure that would work out well for anyone, but
no. If you want to tear it down, he's the guy to do it.
I know. Yeah, that's just what I mean, because the CIA wouldn't take kindly to that. That was my problem. Okay, so there's good and bad. So Trump got the endorsement that he wanted, and we'll see what more support he gets going after that. But it comes with a downside, and of course, one of the first places the left-leaning media went to is Robert Kennedy's sister, where she had this to say.
I just am outraged and disgusted by my brother's actions. I think it's a gaudy and obscene embrace of Donald Trump. I love Bobby. I abhor what he did.
So how is that going to play? So you talk about characterizing your opponent. Of course, the Democrats are doing the exact same thing simultaneously. So they want to paint RFK as this really bad person. So therefore, Trump is a bad person, et cetera. How effective might this be with voters? That's something you pay a lot of attention to.
That comment, nothing. Water off a duck's back, Dan. RFK has been, he's been through 15, 16 ringers, not just the ringer. They have painted him as every kind of extremist and loony, that you possibly can pull, out of a paper bag. And it's not the first time his family has spoken out, and I don't even know who that is. His sister. That's great. Like you're related to RFK. What have you done? So it's not going to move anybody. And the Dems who, or the progressives, I think is a better way to put it, who have moved from RFK to Kamala even before RFK left the race, like they're already gone. And the people who are still there are probably going to Trump anyways. So I don't think there's much more mud they can sling at him and have any kind of effect.
Okay, let's look back over now at the other half of this equation here in the Kamala Harris part. One of the issues that I raised on my last show about this topic was that whether it was designed or whether it just worked out that way, we probably won't know for a long time. But the fact is that because of the decision being made to exchange Biden for Harris came so late, there was no chance to do a primary. Right. Which means that she didn't have to go through the ringer, to use your phrase there a second ago, where the public gets to see all these statements she made and instead see how she's challenged, like she was last time, like when 2019, when she didn't even get to the first vote before she dropped out because she couldn't stand up to the challenges by Biden and by Tulsi Gabbard in particular, were probably the most effective ones here. So now then, there was a piece in the Washington Post the day she gave her convention speech where it talked about how she had been made over. They had a complete remake of what she had been in the first disastrous 2 years of her vice presidency. And it talked about how they took all the hard issues away from her. They gave her things where she had rhetorical strength, et cetera. And then they had this whole team that was going to go in and talk to people in the media and the television to make sure she gets presented in a good way and to make her where she could have, just these big wow moments and no questions. And so that clearly had a big, a positive impact from their perspective, because she went from being somebody who has ridiculed all the word salads and the cackling laugh and all that kind of stuff to all of a sudden now she genuinely looks presidential. And the speeches that she gives and the way she talks is just, night and day different than what it was in the beginning. But that's a facade, in my view. Right. The actual person is Kamala Harris is still the same person that she was before. How important is it for the voters, especially, that they didn't get a chance to see her under the pressure of being challenged during a primary?
So this is probably the most important part, I think, of her candidacy that you just laid out, is that it is twofold here. The first part is that this is all completely AstroTurf. The media has locked arms, stood behind her, and it's kind of gross to watch, to be honest. With that being said, it is AstroTurf. This is the exact same thing that they did with her the last time around, right before Tulsi Gabbard, who just endorsed Trump, I believe, about an hour ago, took her soul in a debate. And then Kamala Harris was done. All you have to do is put her out there in a place where she's non-scripted and she'll come apart. And, I just hope that there is enough time left for that to happen. I don't think they can hide her the entire time, but then again, I didn't think they could hide Biden the entire time in 2020 either. And it's if you go back to her record, you go back to her time in the Senate, she did absolutely nothing. Her colleagues did not particularly care for her, and at the same time, you look at her staff turnover rates, they were always number 1 or 2 in the Senate while she was up there. She's not exactly a people person. And she doesn't have a whole lot of ideas. And if you ask her to, talk about, particular policies in depth, she can't do it. You get word salad. And that's a product of her, if you talk to her staffers or read some of the articles that have come out where her staffers are talking about this, she doesn't like to prepare. She's not interested in things she doesn't like. And that's very, very, very careless at best. And it's dangerous as a candidate too. If all it's going to take, I believe, is a debate with Trump, or possibly some sort of crisis that pops up internationally. Particularly you see Hezbollah and Israel starting to really heat up, and the war in Ukraine starting to heat up. And I believe an incident overseas is going to force her to take off the mask if a debate doesn't. And
I want to actually look at both of those two in the remaining time we have here. First of all, there was news out today that all of a sudden Trump may appear to be balking on having the debate. He's apparently saying, hey, I want a hot mic. I don't want an open mic and whatever, implying that he may not even go through. But it seems to me that this would be a golden opportunity for Trump, and that he should absolutely, be excited about the chance, because now then Kamala can't hide behind just prepared remarks. But it does seem that he's being hesitant on it. How do you make of that?
I hope it's just showmanship. I hope they're trying to keep the, using a tactic where you keep the story, out there and repeating, keep the debate in people's minds. Because if I was on Trump's staff, I would be saying, listen, man, or listen, Mr. President, you need to get out there and do this, period. End of discussion. If the rules aren't to your liking, too bad, so sad, get it done.
That's the Marine in you coming out, I think.
Just a bit. But just go after it, go get it. It's his for the taking. I don't want to say it was handed to him once he survived that assassination attempt, but everything was lined up perfectly, and people want a change out of Washington. They want him back because it's a different pathway, if nothing else, than the current administration, which is seemingly just screwed everything up, from top to bottom. And if he can get out there, just enable himself to get out there, present that, that positive vision, for his America, and get her to walk in circles like he did with Biden, then he's golden, no matter who the host is, no matter what the rules on microphones are and all that.
Yeah, and to your point, and also to the point to one of our viewers just popped up there on the screen. Gary, if you could put that other, I think it's the New York Times piece up there. This was something from 2019, November 2019, when her campaign failed, and the New York Times did a piece on how it unraveled. And one of the first things it said, there was a couple of things important. Said one of the people interviewed said, "This is my third presidential campaign, and I have never seen an organization treat its staff so poorly." That's a phrase I keep seeing with her all throughout this, even her current tenure. This person wrote, "Assailing Mr. Rodriguez and Miss Harris's sister Maya, the campaign chairwoman, for laying off aides with little notice. With less than 90 days until Iowa, we still don't have a plan to win," which is one of the things that jumped out at me. You're talking about, you were in this presidential campaign, you were running towards, the Iowa caucuses to begin, and 90 days out, you still didn't have a plan. I mean, that is a big red flag to me.
Yeah, it's not a leader, straight up. That is not the mark of a leader. And on a long enough timeline, that gets exposed. And that's where the Trump campaign has to find a way to push the issue with her, to do everything in their power to put her out, beyond the reach of the script, beyond the cover of the mainstream media, with these very rehearsed little Q&As or, very well scripted, read off the teleprompter, situations and speeches, and, expose her inflexibility, for one, and her inability to rely on good people because it appears that she can't keep them. I would say that's kind of her Achilles heel.
And in fact, that's one of the things that was in the recent reporting from her first, the one that came, the Washington Post, that came out on the day of her speech last week, was that it reported, especially in the first 18 months or so, she was just going through just people after people. One of the guys was complaining. He said he'd been working for all kinds of senior Democratic people who were used to dealing with high profile people that, that blow up from time to time. They understand they don't get a lot. Even those people were leaving because they said she just can't get along with anybody there. And so now then they got a whole new team. So they shielded her from that. They shielded the other people from her, it seems like. And then they went on this great job from their perspective of, having this carefully crafted image. Now, again, that can be sustained if all she does is give a speech. But is that possible? Can you get through a campaign, even if there is another debate, and there may only be one? Can she continue to hide behind that? And will the American people, I guess, stand by and watch it?
I hope not. However, if we go back to 2020, I thought, in 2020 that, Trump was a shoo-in, and I thought there was no way they could hide Biden the entire time. However, I and I don't know how many other people were very, very wrong about that. And the benefit, the tactical or operational benefit that Kamala Harris has is a very short timeline. She can dodge the press. I mean, I don't think it would be much sweat to dodge any kind of direct scrutiny for 2 months, which is basically where we're at. And if she does that, she's sitting pretty, and it's, it doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence, and in terms of,
well, but I know she can physically pull that off,
right.
But will the voting people be okay with it? Because certainly the Trump campaign will do everything it can to expose that and to highlight that fact. There are already some doing it now. Will the American people be okay with not having that opportunity?
So here's
just the risk they run.
Right. It's a risk. I think that is the risk that the Harris people have to run. That is, they know the candidate, and they've been doing it. This is their chosen course of action on this. On the flip side, what it comes down to, in my opinion, with President Trump is his message. If you don't have Harris out there, making mistakes or being directly engaged, then you have to present a product that people want to buy. And if you look at Harris's campaign, they don't have a single policy position out there right now. And there you go. There's your opening. That is your avenue to victory. If you're the Trump campaign, you have to get out there, pound the pavement, and present a positive vision for America that can't be countered by her, because she doesn't have a vision. She doesn't have policy positions. And the ones she does talk about are absolutely ludicrous, such as price fixing. And the more you talk about how this country, is going to get back on track, how exactly you're going to do it, show leadership traits, the more pressure you put on the Harris campaign to emulate that, to come out and present their vision.
So do you think Trump will do that? Will he provide a positive vision, or will he stick to some of the old stuff where he just loves to use, name calling and just kind of rambling on or so, like he did in the convention? Do you think he can pull that off?
I think he can pull it off. I think he started. I think the clip you showed earlier is evidence of that. And I just hope he keeps doing it. But, he's his own guy. And that's what a lot of people really like about him. He's going to do what he wants. But at the same time, he needs to do what is required. And somebody's got to get in his ear and, pat him on the back and say, you're doing a great job, doing basically what that speech was the other day, and continue that momentum. And if he does, he's good.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, if anything, we've seen how fast political fortunes can change, and how we went. And I was right with you. Shortly after the assassination attempt, I thought he just won the presidency, because I didn't think there was any chance. And then all of a sudden, he got turned upside down because Biden left. And then clearly, at least the administration had been preparing her for quite a long time, more than a year of, reforming or whatever. So she was ready to just usher in right before the convention itself. But now then, that's over. That bounce they got is probably over. And it's in one sense, it's a sprint to the finish, but on the other hand, it's a long way in politics. That a lot of things could change there, and we'll have to wait and see how it worked out. Not the least of which you mentioned a second ago. If anything goes sideways in the Middle East or in the Russia-Ukraine war, and both could, those will immediately be tagged on to her candidacy, because she's part of that plan. But who knows whether it's going to? It's just a lot of unknowns here. But we appreciate you coming on and kind of laying out at least the groundwork of exactly what's at stake and what needs to happen and what shouldn't happen, depending on which candidate we're talking about. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Anytime. Really
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
Look forward to having you back soon, because this is a long race, and I'm sure, going to hear back from Jim some more. Thank you guys for coming on today. We really appreciate you. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't, because, folks, we're going to continue to bring you all kinds of things that are going on in the security realm and the political realm. Anything that has to do with your life that's important, you can probably find it right here on Daniel Davis Deep Dive. See you next time.